BTTV's managing editor Siddharth Zarabi sits down with Minister of State, Electronics and IT, Rajeev Chandrasekhar. He takes us through the future roadmap of semiconductors in India. We've already seen a big announcement, a 76,000 crore rupee PLI scheme. What more is on the cards for the space? Listen in.
My guest today is a person who started his working life as a semiconductor chip designer. Before going on to bring the power of connectivity to Indians, setting up one of the earliest mobile networks in India in the 90s. He followed up and entered politics in 2006 and has been in the Rajya Sabha ever since. Last July, he was appointed as the Union Minister of State for Electronics and Information Technology, as well as Skill Development and Entrepreneurship in Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Council of Ministers. Welcome to the show, Rajeev Chandrasekhar. It gives me a great pleasure to have you with us today on Business Today. I'm going to start this conversation around what I term as semiconductor nation. India is a startup nation, but your government is also now looking at semiconductor nation. And to put it in context for all our viewers, many people don't realize, in fact, most may not realize that one of the negative consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic has been this great semiconductor shortage globally. And it has meant that ordinary Indians are facing delays of months for their most preferred car. They're facing delays for their handsets, and industry is also complaining about other shortages. This is something that you know not just as a minister, but as a professional. I'm going to request you to start by telling us, when do you think this shortage will abate, and in the near term, are there any alternatives that are available?
Siddharth, thank you for having me on the show, and thank you for that question. I think one of the things that the COVID has taught almost every nation and every business in the world is that there has been an extraordinary amount of concentration of the global value chains of electronics and semiconductors around China. And it is clear that in the post-COVID world, there is a desire for the world's economies to seek a broader diversification of this global value chain. But during COVID and even now, one of the consequences of this extraordinary amount of concentration of electronics and semiconductors in this region, and a consequence also of the deep disruptions in the supply chains because of COVID, has been that almost every sector and every segment of the industry that relies on semiconductors, whether that be a car producer in the US or Japan, or a infotech hardware producer in Korea and other parts of the world, all of them have been deeply impacted by the shortages of the semiconductors, as well as the disruptions of the supply chains for those semiconductors and electronics, or a combination of both. Now, that is something, as you know, the COVID has disrupted many things, including lives, livelihoods. This is again one more of those things that COVID has deeply disrupted and impacted. And to your question about when will this ease, I think there is certainly an additional capacity that is being built all around the world on semiconductors and electronics. In the short term, I think it will ease in the next probably 3 to 6 months in the short term. But the actual sustainable resilience of the semiconductor value chain, on the electronics value chain, in my opinion, will play itself out over the next 1 or 2 years as manufacturers diversify and expand to other geographies apart from China and China proximal geographies.
Rajeev, many of our viewers may not remember, but you are one of those Indians who have worked in the semiconductor industry, and you were handpicked by the legendary Vinod Dham on the earliest version of the Pentium chip. So this is a subject that you know more than any other person in all of India's politics. I want to ask you, why has India failed to develop a semiconductor manufacturing base? Despite having a head start in the 70s and 80s with one of the most advanced wafer fabs in Mohali of all places, and then a lot of things happened. Why did we lose the semiconductor opportunity?
Look, I think this will require a totally separate program to go into this. I think it's a question that is worth asking, but the answer is is very simple, Siddharth. It is that I think successive governments have lacked the vision and or the capability to create an electronics manufacturing ecosystem, to sustain it, to grow it, and really seize the opportunity that was available 20, 30 years ago when the world was seeking to diversify from the Western economies into Asia, the electronics value chain. And at that point, India was either asleep at the wheel or the political leadership of that time did not pay enough attention to it. And leading up to 2014, Siddharth, the facts are there for every Indian to see. The electronics and indeed the entire manufacturing ecosystem in India was devastated by these reckless FTAs and mindless, badly negotiated FTAs that India had entered into. It is only after 2014 that the Prime Minister had this determination and this vision that we will create an electronics ecosystem. And as you know that in the 2014 timeframe, we were about 1 lakh crores in electronics manufacturing in India. And today we are 5 lakh crores. And it has taken serious policy making, serious execution capabilities on part of this government to expand the electronics ecosystem. And why I talk about the electronics ecosystem is no country worth its name who wants to be a player in technology, wants to be a player in or a participant in the semiconductor ecosystem can do so without an electronics ecosystem. And in India, pre 2014, there was very like nothing to talk about electronics ecosystem. Now we have a situation where we are exporting mobile phones to global markets. We have, we are now have an ambition of $300 billion of electronics by 2025, 2026, out of which 120 billion will be exported electronics. So we have a growth path for electronics. And it seems now it is absolutely natural and it is absolutely the right time for India to play out its semiconductor ambition and to build this. And again, here it is the Prime Minister's Digital India vision, the vision for electronics, and his tremendously supportive policy making of 76,000 crores of capital being invested by the government of India into building an electronics and semiconductor ecosystem that is going to make India's moves today far more credible and far more real, able to succeed than any time in the history of independent India. Like I said, I don't want to dwell too much, Siddharth, on why we could not do this before. We should have, we could have, we must have. All of that remains a thing that we will look back at as missed opportunities. But that is, in a lot of ways, Prime Minister Modi's government is addressing on a daily basis mistakes that have been made in the past, opportunities that have been lost in the past. We are trying to make up for all of those mistakes in the past by doing the right thing today.
Rajeev, before I get you to talk more about the semiconductor policy and explain that for the common man, for the common viewer, I also want to tell our viewers that there is Silicon Valley folklore about two mafias in the semiconductor industry. One was the Indian mafia and the other was the Iranian mafia. And you have a string of names who have actually built the semiconductor industry in the United States. What gives you the confidence that the current policy framework that you just spoke about, the 76,000 crore package, it will succeed this time? I ask you this because previous attempts in for example 2017 or thereabouts with 2-3 companies have not succeeded. What gives you the confidence that it will work now?
First of all, there is a total reset in my opinion, and I say this with I mean you will say that I'm saying this because I'm a minister, I'm a from the BJP, but I mean this sincerely. There is a total reset in the perception about India and its capabilities amongst the Western tech world or the tech ecosystem. The and that has been reinforced by India's performance during COVID. To a large degree, India has earned a tremendous amount of awe and respect in the way our economy has rebounded during COVID, in the way technology has been used in the last 6 years that has allowed for this mass scale vaccination at a level and scale that even the world is not able to comprehend, and they are in awe of. And today the world looks at India in very, very different terms. It is not a India which is an India just of potential. The narrative of India for many, many decades, Siddharth, was we are a great country, we have a large population, and we have a great market, and therefore with great potential. And we did that with the IT services space, and we did, grew a lot. But where we missed out for several years was in deep tech, in electronics, in semiconductor. And today, the world looks at India, and I say this because I interact with all of the world's leading majors in terms of companies. And they look at India and India's ambitions being backed by an execution capability and an execution record by this government that is very credible. It is one thing to dream. It is the other thing to have dreams that are backed by people who are able to realize those dreams into reality. And the government of India today, and India particularly, is seen today as a country that not only is dreaming big, but also has the ability in government, its startups, its entrepreneurs, as having the ability to realize those dreams and make it a reality. Look, today, when the Honorable Prime Minister talks with such a lot of affection and respect for our startups and talks about 2 unicorns every month, it is something that is absolutely astonishing to the rest of the world that we are creating one of the world's largest sustainably growing startup ecosystems.
Right.
So in the tech space, Siddharth, in a nutshell, the world sees India as a leading player in technology. And as the new normal of the world is increasing digitization of the world, Web 3.0, Industry 4.0, and all of those things that are going to continue to disrupt and change the new normals, everybody realizes that India and Indian entrepreneurs and Indian talent are going to be part of the leadership of this global technology drive. And therefore, that credibility and respect for India is there today. So, today, when the global semiconductor majors engage with India, it is no longer with skepticism, it is with absolute serious, earnest interest in understanding our mission, our policies, and our goals for electronics and semiconductor and technology in general.
Rajeev, since you speak about that and how global semiconductor companies are talking with seriousness with the government, I have to ask you, is Intel coming to India to set up a fab?
It will be my fondest dream, and I'm sure for every Indian, if any of these large semiconductor companies today who bring to the table technology, research, manufacturing know-how and capability, look at India as a partner. There is TSMC, there is Intel, there is Global Foundries, there is Samsung, there's NXP, there's Infineon. There are so many companies in the world that are all either straddling a niche in semiconductors or straddling a broad amount of technology and capabilities in semiconductor. We are today open to partner with any of them or all of them. And I think, given the fact that we are going to be a leading player in the electronics value chain, as the Honorable Prime Minister himself said at the World Economic Forum, given those ambitions are out there for the world to see, given the fact that the government has a very, very pragmatic policies for semiconductor investments in this country, and given that the world today is looking at diversifying and diversifying its supply chains in semiconductor, I think India is a very, very attractive opportunity for investment and partnering for all of the global majors. And I want to add one other thing here. The future of semiconductors and computing and communication in particular, Siddharth, is moving from semiconductor intensity and manufacturing intensity to a regime where there will be a hybrid of manufacturing and design innovation that is going to drive computing performance. And that is exactly the sweet spot at which India is positioned. We have tremendous amount of depth and capability in semiconductor design, system design innovation, and that is playing to our strength. So my pitch to every one of these Indian international majors is, the future is exactly a combination of many things intersecting, and India is sitting right at the intersection of all of these changes. The talent that India has, the capabilities that Indian youth and entrepreneurs have, plays to what the future of technology will be. And I think it is the smart thing for most of these companies to do, to evaluate India as a partner to invest in and build the next generation of semiconductors.
Just last year, Intel announced that it would invest around $7 billion in Malaysia for a semiconductor chip packaging factory and create 9,000 jobs. Since we've been working on the policy for quite some time, I just want to ask you, why didn't Intel, for example, choose to do that in India? We have an ecosystem that would have perhaps given it that chance to invest in our country.
No, Siddharth, I mean, this is a question to which I don't have an answer. Obviously, why has no company invested in Indian semiconductors? Why pre-2014 did we not have an electronics industry to talk about? These are all things that we will talk to our grandchildren about one day and say these are the missed opportunities for India. But that is what Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji is doing. He is trying to make up for lost time and missed opportunities and really focus the country and focus the nation by working with the state governments, working with industry to ensure that these opportunities in these coming years and coming decades. And he said it beautifully yesterday in the World Economic Forum, that his visioning and his planning is for the next 25 years. Even as we celebrate 75 years of independence, we have a government and a leadership that is focused on thinking about the India when it turns 100 years of independent nation. So a lot of this is about the ability for political leadership to think of the future, which in my opinion, frankly, was not there in the past. We today have that, fortunately. And I think that is the direction that we have to go. That is the direction we will go. And it's I always say, don't look back too much and don't worry about the rearview mirror, about how many kilometers we traveled without achieving anything. And that's probably true. We should just focus on the windscreen in front and focus on bringing these majors to India, creating an ecosystem of innovation, design, and manufacture for both semiconductors and electronics. India has a tremendous opportunity to be a player in this and a leading player in the global value chains of global electronics and semiconductors. And we should realize that and make it a real opportunity, make that opportunity a real one.
Fair point, Rajeev. And in fact, it's not just the foreign companies who are interested. We've already had some amount of news flow, for example, the Vedanta group saying that it wants to invest over $15 billion in the next 5-10 years to make display and semiconductor chips in India. The Tata group is said to be looking for land in Tamil Nadu, Karnataka and Telangana. There have been a couple of other Indian consortiums. For our viewers, when do you think any of this will actually fructify? I take your point that you cannot speak about a particular company's plan, but generally, when do you expect this to actually get affected on the ground?
You know that I'm not a great crystal ball gazer, and I just believe in following the lead of our Prime Minister, which is work for the today and the tomorrow will play itself out. So we are working hard in essentially creating the policy framework. We are advocating that policy to every player in the semiconductor and electronic space that is interested in India, and we are making even those who are uninterested in India aware of this opportunity and get interested in India. I think it's a very good thing that Indian companies are also taking the lead. I have urged a lot of the large tech companies who are traditional tech services companies. I've urged them, look, you are large, big global leaders in tech. One of the new elements of the digital economy is electronics and semiconductor. You must get into that. So I'm actually pleased that there are Indian companies that are also joining the fray. collaborating, tying up with those who have the requisite technologies and looking to invest. We will continue to be supportive of both foreign investments and Indian entrepreneurship and Indian startups and Indian companies. So I think we will see over the next 3 to 6 months how the policy plays out, how our advocacy efforts play out. I am reasonably confident that India in its destiny has in it to becoming a leading power, a leading hub for electronics manufacture, semiconductor manufacture, design, and the whole innovation ecosystem. So I'm deeply hopeful and confident.
As I ask you the next question, just to tell our viewer that the manpower and the intellectual sort of firepower that Indians have in the semiconductor industry cannot be underestimated. By one reckoning, there are well over 25,000 top-notch designers, chip designers and other engineers associated with this field who are working. We of course have a large import dependence. Again, one number states that we are annually importing close to $25 billion of semiconductors, and therefore that makes sense for an Indian investment. Rajeev, also tell our viewers about this plan to revive the Semiconductor Complex Limited, and there's a small story which I'm sure you are aware of. This was a PSU being set up in the 70s and 80s, and there was competition between Maharashtra and Punjab who gets to set up the plant, and I'm told that Punjab ultimately got it because the land was offered for 1 rupee. That plant then got burnt. There is an entire conspiracy theory around it. It was a state-of-the-art plant. Then it went to the Department of Space, and now you have decided to revive it. Tell our viewers about the plans that you have for it, because it was an icon in Mohali and gave great pride to people of Punjab for many decades.
Let me first respond to your point about talent and skilling, Siddharth. And as you correctly said, the world semiconductor ecosystem around the world is full of great Indians and Indian success stories, whether they are in design, whether they are in manufacturing. You mentioned Vindham, you mentioned, there are so many very bright, talented Indians that are in leaders in the semiconductor space that I believe that in some sense we are preordained to be a player in the semiconductor space. In terms of skilling and semiconductor research, it is an area where our academic ecosystem has lagged, and that is natural because there was no room for semiconductor research and semiconductor design skills at that level. But it is an area that we are very focused on. We have a roadmap where we will have very soon a large number of very skilled, highly capable, excellently skilled talent in semiconductor design and even semiconductor research. So that is something that we are working in the ministry with the AICTE, with the Ministry of Education, and creating that, in a sense, pipeline of talent that will fuel our Indian semiconductor innovation ecosystem. In terms of the SEL, I remember in the early 90s when I had just come back from the US, I remember at that point looking at SEL and wondering why it was not doing more. And then all those stories about fires and conspiracies and whether there was a deliberate attempt to scuttle India's semiconductor ambitions and semiconductor growth. Anyway, those are conspiracy theories for which I don't have an answer. But I do have an answer to your question about what will be the future of SEL. I think SEL has a tremendous amount of capabilities. It has a tremendous amount of capabilities in terms of human resources. It has a basic capability and process right now that it has of manufacturing semiconductors. It has been, as you correctly said, it has been under the Department of Space, doing work for the space missions and the ISRO's requirements. METI will now will work on hopefully after the government reorganizes the ministries and the rules of business around it. We will draw up a perspective plan to grow SEL, and I will not say anything more today. But I think, except to say that SEL will be a very important component of the ecosystem of semiconductor design, manufacture, and innovation and research that the government of India under Prime Minister Modi wants to build. So it will be an important component, and we will roll out the plan and reveal the plan as that plan gets finalized.
Before I let you go, Rajeev, one last question, and this is in context of you talking about all the global majors and the Indian companies who are also looking at this space, and we hope that those plans fructify. There's one issue that's dominating headlines, and which is not semiconductors but a related space. This is electric vehicles and Tesla and Elon Musk's recent tweet saying that he's facing challenges in India, and it's sort of led to a lot of opinion being generated on that tweet. The government has also said that it is clear that it will not offer duty cuts. It instead wants manufacturing in India. Where do you stand on that as a minister in the Modi Council, sir?
No, so I think the government of India has spoken on that. I will not add to that. But I will speak broadly on the EV space. I believe given where we are on electronics and our ambitions and our goals for semiconductors, as you know, EV is a very semiconductor and electronics and tech intensive product and platform. I think India and Indian entrepreneurs, there are so many, I've met many of them, very, very, very bright startups that are in the EV space, in the battery space, in the energy space, in the AI space. So I think this is an area that India will take a lead in, and India is going to be playing a bigger role for in terms of the global evolution of the EV segment. Apart from that, I don't want to speak to the controversy or the issues with Tesla. We respect Elon Musk everybody does. Anybody who has a slightest hint or connection to the tech space has the greatest respect and regard for him. But India is totally committed to an Atmanirbhar Bharat approach towards electronics and technology. We don't want just things to be imported. If it can be manufactured, it can be designed, and an ecosystem for that can be built in India. So I would encourage Tesla and Elon Musk to explore India as a partner in not just selling a platform, but also in design, development, and manufacturing that state-of-the-art EV platform.
Absolutely. Rajeev Chandrasekhar, I'm going to thank you for your time with us today and wish you all the very best, and the government for its plans to convert India into a semiconductor nation. Thank you very much for your time, for speaking with Business Today.